What happened over Iran has changed the Middle East forever. We will soon bring you the Iranian secret that was kept at a university in Tehran. So don't go anywhere. All the details are coming up on the secret that the Revolutionary Guards in Iran tried to protect, and that the Israeli Air Force destroyed for them yesterday evening. We are hours away from an explosion in the Middle East. The President of the United States is issuing an extremely serious ultimatum to Iran. Trump announced today that if Iran does not fully open the Strait of Hormuz within 48 hours, we will destroy its various power stations. In response, Iran is threatening to strike American targets. And will the development of the war force the United States towards the most dangerous operation in history? We will soon dive into all the details. And in the last few minutes, the Israeli Air Force launched a second round of strikes today in Iran. An Iranian Air Force base in Isfahan was attacked. Satellite images from today reveal the scale of the destruction after the Air Force strike on the Malek Ashtar University, an institution subordinate to the Iranian Ministry of Defense that was used for developing nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles. A new threat has emerged from Iran in recent hours. Tourist sites and also parks around the world could become targets of attacks. Prepare yourself, according to the Ayatollah regime. Israeli intelligence exposed information to Britain, and Israel is warning missiles could reach all the way to London. Today, a report reached us from under the sea. Britain's secret weapon is already aimed at the heart of Tehran. An advanced British nuclear submarine has been deployed in the Arabian Sea with the ability to launch cruise missiles at Iran. And it is important to remember, this is not the only nuclear submarine in the region right now. The Iranian regime has stopped functioning as a state and has turned into an occupying force in its own country. And also, how is all of this connected to the hiding of Khamenei's son? And is the serious fear of an Iranian invasion of the Gulf states realistic? Today, Iran threatened that it would invade the United Arab Emirates. I'm Yair Pinto, and with me is Mati Shoshani. And here, we are boots on the ground that bring you the whole truth about what's happening in Israel and everything that's happening right now in our neighborhood, the Middle East. So, the war against Iran is moving towards a more dramatic and more intense turning point. In the last few hours, we are approaching the end of day 22 of the Roaring Lion War, or by its American name, Epic Fury. The day opened in Israel with 6 waves of launches from Iran. Netanyahu, in a statement in English at the impact site in Arad, Israeli city in the south, yesterday he said, Israel and the United States are acting for the sake of the whole world. The time has come for other countries to join in the fight. Just now, US President Donald Trump claimed that now, after the death of Iran, the main threat to the United States is actually coming from within. We will soon bring you all the details. Trump said explicitly tonight that if Iran does not fully open the Strait of Hormuz within 48 hours, we will destroy its various power stations. Iran seized control of the Strait of Hormuz as a victory over the United States and over Israel, while President Trump gave 48 hours to open the strait, and then in Tehran they are making clear that they have conditions of their own. From the perspective of the Revolutionary Guards, they are winning, and there will be no ceasefire without a historic lesson for Israel and for the United States. They are demanding a change in the world order, the evacuation of US embassies, and the extradition of journalists who humiliated Iran. Today, we will bring you the new madness of the Revolutionary Guards. Iran's 6 preconditions for ending the war are being exposed. And at the same time, the regime published the list of blackout targets in the Gulf and also declared publicly to the Gulf states, say goodbye to electricity. And meanwhile, the question is being asked, will there be boots on the ground in the war against Iran? And today, we will bring you all the information on the forces that the United States is sending and the possible scenarios. We will focus on what the forces that the Americans are reinforcing against Iran actually include and what that means for the continuation of this war. All the details are coming up. Trump wrote in the last few minutes, now, with the death of Iran, America's greatest enemy is the Democratic Party. It seems that while Donald Trump is eulogizing the Revolutionary Guards, they are not only threatening, but also clearly showing fear behind the scenes. It appears that in Iran, there is growing concerns over the issue of rebuilding the state as a fighting that expands, especially since the United States and Israel are choosing critical infrastructure as targets. In Europe, they are surprised. We're actually within range of the Iranian missiles. The launch of Iranian missiles towards Diego Garcia and the signs that their range has extended beyond 3,000 kilometers are beginning to shake Europe's sense of immunity. Media outlets in Germany and Britain are examining scenarios of strikes on bases and cities, while official sources are trying to present the threat as unlikely at this stage. An Israeli source said that at no point was there ever an expectation that the Iranian regime would fall during the war, and added that according to current assessments, this will happen several months after the war ends. The United States is increasing the pace of strikes in Iran, and in Israel, we estimate that Donald Trump is on the way to taking control of Karag Island, the oil island of Iran. And our senior Middle East correspondent, Mati Shoshani, will dive with us into the central question of the day. Is the Ayatollah regime close to surrender? And meanwhile, in Lebanon, in the campaign against Hezbollah, the IDF continues its strikes against the terrorist organization. 9 terrorists from Hezbollah were eliminated in southern Lebanon. The Air Force and fighters of Division 91 eliminated 9 terrorists from the Hezbollah terrorist organization in southern Lebanon. In addition, in southern Lebanon, the commander of the special forces of the Radwan force was terminated. After the deadly rocket, the maneuver in Lebanon will deepen, and houses will be destroyed according to the Rafah and the Gaza model. The IDF continues trying to push Hezbollah away from the border in order to prevent fire on the communities, the civilian communities of Israel, such as the one from which Ofer Moshkovitz was killed just this morning. After the bombing of the brigades over the Litani, Minister Katz, Israel's defense minister, says that the military has been instructed to accelerate the destruction of houses in the contact villages. In defense establishment, they are not eager to strike the infrastructure of the Lebanese state for fear of portraying Hezbollah as the defender of the people. So, let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and with me is Mati Shoshani. And we are boots on the ground that bring you the whole truth about what's happening in Israel. And this is day 22 of the war against the Revolutionary Guards in Iran, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. In just a second before we begin, I want to call on you to keep spreading the truth, share our content with as many people as possible, click the subscribe button, and most importantly, do not forget to look for me, Yair Pinto, and Mati Shoshani on social media so you can get the full behind-the-scene picture of what it is to live in Israel under war. Our senior Middle East correspondent, Mati Shoshani. We are seeing things heat up very fast. On the one hand, Trump is eulogizing the Revolutionary Guards in Iran for the second time, and on the other hand, the fire in Israel is not ending. While the Israeli and the American strikes have badly damaged the Iranian functionalities, the question is being asked is, when will the regime in Iran fall? That's kind of the million-dollar question, Mati, so you better have the right answer.
Well, Yael, first of all, it's good to see you again. Secondly, I'd say it's probably in the millions of dollars per hour that this is costing the world. If you think about the cost of what this war has cost the U.S. in direct expenses, the costs and damages to the global economy, this is a very, very, very expensive war, and it will continue to be so. And the question that that's in everyone's mind is, what will it take? What will really happen? There was, I think, an expectation in most minds that don't really understand the geopolitics of Iran, that the regime would fall. That there'd be enough strikes and they'd eventually wave a white flag and say, we surrender. We're afraid of the terror of, the armed forces of the United States and Israel, and go home. That hasn't happened. That's also not going to happen. We talked about this in today's earlier broadcast. This isn't simply the situation in Iran. Iran is a large country with a very strong government that has ruled in an iron fist for decades. And they're going to continue doing so until they're overthrown and completely decapitated. And the big question is, what does it take? What brings them to a tipping point? And you and I have both interviewed quite a few experts on the topic of Iran. And I can tell you one thing, every single expert says about what it takes to remove a regime in Iran. And you know what the answer is, Yael? No one knows. That is the answer.
But they will take like 15 minutes to explain why they don't know, right?
It'll take about an hour to get to that point. But for instance, we interviewed several times in recent months. We interviewed Harold Rode, who actually was a student in Iran during the Islamic Revolution of 1979. And he himself says, he's like, I was on the ground and we didn't know it was happening. I was on the ground, and the people of Iran who were chanting for the supreme leader to come back to Iran, they themselves didn't know what was going to happen. And when it happens, it's almost an instantaneous moment. So there's sort of a tipping point that we're not sure exactly where it's going to be and what it's going to be. But here's a couple of facts that I think people need to take home with them. The longer this prolongs, the more expensive the war becomes. The more expensive the war becomes, the stronger the incentive on the United States and Israel to use maximum violence against the Iranian regime. But not only for them, also for the Gulf states, there becomes less and less to lose. And also for the countries of Europe that so far have been busy doing their favorite pastime, which is speak loudly and do very little. Even for those countries, the incentive to take action will increase, and the fear of Iranian response and retaliation will decrease. Why is that? Because when the price of oil and the price in the gas station continues climbing and climbing and climbing, when Europeans have trouble buying gas for heating their homes or for powering their gas stations, and it starts affecting the economies, the stock markets, even the pension savings of different people, suddenly the thought of what will Iran do as retaliation to our attacks on them becomes less of a threat, and the question of can we afford to not respond to Iran becomes more of an issue. And I'll give you some framework to understand that equation. A week and a half ago, when Trump called the nations of the world to join into the alliance, to the coalition, safeguarding the Strait of Hormuz, 0 countries were willing to participate. A couple days later, the number goes up to 6 countries that are saying, we'll do it, but under these conditions. Correct me if I'm wrong, Yael, yesterday, or as we were going into the weekend, I think it was 20 countries that were discussing being part of a coalition against Iran. That's the number I remember.
That's correct.
So you're seeing
that's correct, with all the Gulf states that are part of it.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly the point, where there seems to be this increase in people's willingness to really take action against Iran, because there's a decrease in what they have to lose if they go against the Iranians. The Gulf states that have so far been afraid to respond actively against Iran, again with the exception of the United Arab Emirates, well, if their GDP is cut, if they've lost, run the numbers. We're talking, if they're losing $150 billion in revenue, and they're starting to look, and they have oil piling up in their reserves and no cash coming in, and the Iranians lobbing missiles at them on a daily basis, day by day, they become more and more incentivized to take action against the Iranians. Day by day, European countries and other countries of the world become more and more incentivized to take action. And then we get to really the big equation that we're talking about, that you've just been talking up, leading into this moment earlier in this broadcast, which is the question of what more can the United States and Israel do? Just throwing out some ideas. President Trump threatens a very narrow timeline. He says you have a window of 48 hours to open up the Strait of Hormuz, or else we go after all your energy manufacturing facilities. What that does, it ruins the infrastructure for Iran. It ruins, again, they probably have backup generators for many of their military facilities, but as a country, it's a very demoralizing act. What does Iran do immediately? They threaten, they publish a map, and they say, well, look, here are all the big power manufacturing facilities in the Gulf states. We're coming for them if you come after us. But, again, it's a question of interest and how painful the situation is. The more this becomes painful for the nations of the world, the more they're going to be willing to act against Iran. The more it's painful for them, the more everyone is willing to do more and more extreme things to the Iranian regime to really stop them. And then to answer your question that you asked just before I started talking, people say, well, boots on the ground were never in the plan. We never thought that they would happen. Yeah, well, what if an oil barrel hits $200 a barrel? What if, countries in Europe are having trouble getting natural gas? What if the stock markets are going crazy? What if instead of 2,000 ships, it's been 3 months and there's been no oil moving through the Strait of Hormuz? Suddenly people are willing to do a lot more than they thought they'd be willing to do. In all of that, Israel is the least extreme version of all of this because we're a small island economy. We get our oil from different sources. Our economy is so small that it's, just on a global scale, that it's affected by so many different factors. But if you're a country like France, a country like Britain, a country like, just name Germany, and suddenly like running your factories becomes more expensive. Suddenly the threat of the continued war becomes more and more expensive. Now you're thinking to yourself, you know what? Maybe taking action against Iran is not that bad. Maybe we should do something about this. And that, I think, is going to be the tipping point, Yael.
Yeah, and I think that, Mati, on top of that, okay, if the economic pressure is not enough for Europe to act, maybe the threat of an actual ballistic missile that can hit London, Rome, Berlin, or other places will incentivize them to do something.
Yeah, that is a good point. And you were talking about this in the previous broadcast, which is we don't really know how many of these long-range ballistic missiles they have. We don't know exactly what model they were using or how they reached this range. Maybe they reached the range by launching them with or very, very, strong tailwind and very, very small, payload in the sort of the nose of the rocket. We're not sure. I don't think they have a very large number of these longer range ballistic missiles, but even if they did, I don't see Iran starting to launch attacks against every European state. It's just not an effective use of their resources. They'll continue attacking the Gulf states. They'll continue attacking Israel, as they've done, and maybe target some key American facilities in the Middle East, specifically in their neighborhood, to prevent them from carrying out attacks or basing their forces so close to their borders. But I'd say there's more to it than that. They have a lot of sort of aces up their sleeve. They have submarines. They have, speedboats hidden away in tunnels throughout Iran. They have, launchers of ballistic missiles hidden in caves in the mountains in northern Iran. We've seen the footage of them sort of coming out of the tunnel, quickly assembling, the system and then launching the missile. And sometimes it launches, sometimes it burns, on the launch pad because they didn't have time to set it up properly. They have a lot of things that are hidden away. It's really not a question just of the ballistic missiles. It's how much more can they inflict pain on others before a very substantial attack happens against them. I dare say this, I don't think anyone wants to take over Iran physically. Everyone is hoping that it's the Iranian people that do that, and not, not the American forces, not Israeli for sure, and not any other country in the region.
Yeah, exactly. And Donald Trump threatened, it was like a few hours ago, that the Iranians have 48 hours to open the Strait of Hormuz, or he will take it over. Is that like a valid threat, this 48 hours, or is just like a war talk?
I think it's both here. I think he means business. Will they open the straits in 48 hours? I don't think so. I seriously, seriously doubt they'll do that. It's beneath them as they perceive themselves to cooperate with the requests of anyone, especially the President of the United States while he's bombing their country. But I'd say more than that, why would they? Like, I'm thinking in their mind, they've already done so much damage and burnt so many bridges, literally and figuratively speaking, at this point. Why would they? I mean, the biggest chokehold they have on the world is the Strait of Hormuz. The last thing they're going to give up is the ability to say that they will cause damage to the Strait of Hormuz. Even if they have nothing left, they'll still say, we'll blow up any ship that passes through, just with the hope of that threat being enough to really put fear in the hearts of people. So, no, I don't think they're going to respond to it. I think Trump is going to have to really up the level of attacks against Iranian targets. I have no doubt about that. And I think there's quite a lot of more of those targets that need to be hit. Again, big country with very substantial physical barriers, mountain ridges, deserts, just a large depth of space. And, they're spread out over a large area, large population, diversified government, as in it's not spread it's not focused in just one central area, but in multiple centers throughout the country. You can't just bring down this regime with one attack. And I dare say this, even if we attacked several of their electrical manufacturing plants, electrical plants, it won't completely stop the regime. They've already shown they have no problem, burning down the infrastructure for their own people. They've already, on their own accord, destroyed the infrastructure of Iran. It's just a question of what does it take to remove them. And I dare say that they'll continue fighting until something more substantial happens.
Well, definitely. Most important prayer point for the day, Mati?
Yeah, I'd say something slightly different this time around. I'd say that we see a swift resolution of this conflict. I mean, the worst case scenario is that this gets drawn out again and again and again and again. Pray for quick regime change in Iran. Whatever that looks like, we don't know. We don't know what faction has the power. We don't know what resistance group has the weapons or the desire or the willingness to put themselves in harm's way to go against the regime. But that needs to be the number one solution for that to happen in Iran. The moment that happens, the war is over, Yael. There is no more war if the regime is removed. There is no more war if the Ayatollahs no longer control the country. We need to see a very substantial, a very swift, and likely a very violent coup take place in Iran to remove these people completely. And when that happens, the war is over. That should be our number one prayer.
Yeah, definitely. And we're praying with you, Mati. Thank you so much. And we'll see you again tomorrow.
That's right.
And to all of you that are watching us from your houses on the go, if this is the first time that you're watching TBN Israel, know that we are here every single day, multiple times a day throughout this war to give you the best updated and most accurate information about what's happening in Israel and the wider Middle East. Why? Because it's important that you will know the truth and that you will know how to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. So, again, first timers, hit the subscribe button. Make sure to leave a comment. Let us know where you're from. And if you want to look at this war through our eyes, behind the scenes, look for Yair Pinto and Mati Shoshani on social media platforms. Because over the years, so many of you have asked us, how can we experience the Holy Land if we cannot travel there in person? How can we visit the places where Jesus walked in? The truth is that most Christians will never have a chance to come to Israel. And right now, with the war expanding into direct conflicts with Iran, travel has become even more difficult. Tourism is down, and many people feel disconnected from the land of the Bible. That is why we want to share something that we genuinely love and personally recommend. It's called Arza Box. Arza creates beautifully curated seasonal gift boxes filled with handcrafted products, spices, home goods, and artisan creations, all made by Israeli families and small businesses. And every box is themed around a biblical location. The newest release is the Jordan River box, centered on the place where Jesus was baptized. It is immersive, it is meaningful, and it is designed to help you experience your faith in a tangible way, bringing the Holy Land into your home. And here is what makes it even more powerful. During a time of war, when small Israeli businesses need support the most, your purchase directly blesses families here in this land, the land of Israel. So you're deepening your faith and you're standing with all of us here in Israel. That's a double blessing. So if you want yours, go to arzabox.com/TBNIL and use the coupon code TBNIL for an extra 15% off of your subscription. Again, that's arzabox.com/TBNIL and use the coupon code TBNIL for an extra 15% off. Experience the land of the Bible right from your home. 6 waves of launches from Iran opened this day in Israel. Sirens were heard again in the center of the country. Impact sites were reported in the greater Tel Aviv area. And at those very same hours, the Israeli Air Force was already back in action over Iran and launched another round of strikes. In the last few minutes, there were also reports of a strike on an Israeli Air Force base in Isfahan. The question now is simple. Are we still in a phase of heavy military pressure, or have we already entered the 48 hours that could blow up the entire Middle East? This is day 22 of the Roaring Lion War, or by its American name, Epic Fury. And this day does not look like just another day in this war. It looks like a day in which several arenas connected into one moment: the Israeli home front, the Strait of Hormuz, Tehran, Lebanon, the Gulf, and even Britain and Europe. Everything is moving together. Everything is accelerating. In Israel, the day opened under fire. 6 waves of launches from Iran, more impact sites, more pressure on the home front, and more proof that the Iranian regime continues to aim mainly at population centers, civilians. At the same time, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu arrived at yesterday's impact site in Arad, Israeli city in the south that was hit, and chose to speak in English. His message was sharp. Israel and the United States are acting for the whole world, and the time has come for the other countries to join. This was not just another sentence for the international media. It was an attempt to define the framework of this war. No longer just a confrontation between Israel and Iran, but a confrontation that Jerusalem and Washington are trying to define as a struggle over the entire regional order. And above all of this stood the ultimatum overnight. US President Donald Trump stated explicitly, if Iran does not completely reopen the Strait of Hormuz within 48 hours, the United States will destroy its power stations, beginning with the largest one. This is a direct threat against the national infrastructure, no longer a threat against a military site, no longer a hint about a headquarters or a missile facility. Power stations, in other words, electricity, industry, state functioning, daily life. In simple terms, Washington is signaling to Tehran that it is prepared to move from war against missile and nuclear systems to a war against the life support systems of the state itself. Iran responded immediately. A spokesman for Qatam el-Anibaya, the headquarters, and also the regime's Central Operations Command, warned that any strike against the fuel and energy infrastructure of the Islamic Republic will be answered by strikes on American and Israeli energy infrastructures, information technology, and also desalination facilities all across this region. At the same time, a list of blackout targets in the Gulf was published. The message was public. If anything happens to our electricity, the whole region will go dark. On the list in the United Arab Emirates were the Barkan reactor and the Jabal Ali facility. In Saudi Arabia, the power stations at El Kuriyah and Ras Tanura. In Qatar, the Ras Lafan and the El Hol facilities. And in Kuwait, the El Zur stations and the Sajaiya Energy Park. In other words, Iran is not just threatening, it is already mapping its targets out loud. It is important to understand what is behind this ultimatum. The Strait of Hormuz is not just a sea route, it is a global energy artery. Before the war, more than 130 vessels passed through it each single day. Now, according to the published figures, that number has dropped to just 3 or 4. More than 20 commercial ships have been attacked. Thousands of vessels and crew members are stranded in the area. From Iran's point of view, control of Hormuz is currently proof that it still is capable of hurting the world faster than the United States is capable of stabilizing the situation by military force. In Tehran, they see this as a short-term victory over Israel and the United States, not because they defeated them on the battlefield, but because they succeeded in turning an energy market, the Gulf, and the global economy into part of the war. At the same time, Tehran is also making clear that there will be no simple ceasefire. 6 Iranian preconditions for ending the war were exposed today, and they show how much the Revolutionary Guards are now speaking the language of forcing a new regional order. A historic lesson for Israel and the United States, a change in the world order, the evacuation of US embassies, additional demands such as them also related to journalists whom the Iranians see as having humiliated the regime. There no longer sounds like negotiations over a ceasefire. It sounds like an attempt to write a surrender document for the other side, while Iran itself is under heavy attack. And opposite that tone of victory, there are also clear signals of internal anxiety. In Tehran, they understand that the United States and Israel are no longer satisfied with striking launch systems alone. They're going more and more after critical infrastructure, both in Washington and in Jerusalem. People are now talking about the next stage. The United States is increasing the pace of its strikes. In Israel, the assessment is that Trump is on the way to taking control of Karag Island, the oil island of Iran. If that happens, it would be an enormous economic blow. Karag is one of the key points of the Iranian oil exports. Controlling it could choke the regime's ability to pay salaries, channel money to the military systems, and function over time. This is also why the question of boots on the ground keeps coming back. What does that actually mean in this case? According to the reports, the United States is already moving additional forces into the area. There is talk of thousands of soldiers, including Marine forces. The scenarios on the table include three axes: ensuring freedom of navigation in Hormuz, taking control of Karag Island, and action to remove enriched uranium from the Iranian territory. This is where the possibility of what has already been described as the most dangerous operation in history comes into picture. An operation that would require deep penetration, rubble clearance, handling radioactive materials, and a ground presence in the heart of hostile territory. This is no longer the model of an airstrike sortie. This is something else entirely. And in the middle of all of this, Donald Trump continues to speak in his own language. In the last few minutes, he wrote that now, after the death of Iran, America's greatest enemy is actually the Democratic Party at home. This is an American political sentence, but it is also part of the broader picture. Trump is signaling to his own public that the war in Iran is moving faster than expected, that the goals are being achieved, and that the main argument, from his point of view, is already shifting back inward to Washington. On the other hand, Tehran is trying to show that it is not breaking, that it is still the one setting conditions, and that it still holds Hormuz in its hands. But if you look at what is actually happening inside Iran, the picture is far less stable. In the last few minutes, a strike was reported on an Iranian Air Force base in Isfahan. There is still no clear official response from the authorities there, but the very report joins a series of strikes that is moving closer and closer to the depth of the regime's military and research systems. And this is where one of the most important sorties of the day comes in. What was hidden at Malik Ashtar University in Tehran? The name university can be misleading. This is not an ordinary academic institution. Malik Ashtar is directly subordinate to the Iranian Ministry of Defense. It has campuses in Tehran and Isfahan, and it operates as a research and technological arm of the security establishment. According to what was revealed today in new satellite images, the destruction there is very extensive. The images show a massive building that was destroyed and confirm a precise strike on a site that was used for strategic research and development for the nuclear program and for the ballistic missile program. And that site, it was said, components for nuclear weapons and other weapon systems were developed. This is one of those Iranian secrets that the Revolutionary Guards try to hide inside an institution that outwardly looks like an academic campus. Does it remind you of somebody else? Hint: Hamas, Hezbollah, and other terrorist organizations. The importance of Malik Ashtar is very great. It was founded in 1984. It is directly subordinate to the Ministry of Defense and focuses on training scientists and conducting research in aeronautics, nuclear engineering, and military technologies. It has been under international sanctions for years now, and according to the assessments, it served as a cover platform for bodies involved in the design and production of nuclear warheads and funneled manpower and knowledge into the missile program. Therefore, the strike there is not just a hit on a building. It is an attempt to strike the brain, the memory, and the ability of the Iranian machine to renew itself. There is a short point here that is worth pushing on. If you want us to keep bringing you that full picture exactly the way that we are doing now, just take a moment and do something very small for us. Subscribe to TBN Israel YouTube channel. Turn on the notification. Share this video with everyone who needs to understand what's happening. And if you are joining us right now for the first time, my name is Yair Pinto. With me is Mati Shoshani, and we are Boots on the Ground, the TBN Israel YouTube channel that brings you all the news about Israel and the Middle East. So share with your friends, leave a comment, and now let us return to the picture of what's happening on the ground. Alongside a strike on the Malek Ashtar University, Israel is continuing to operate against the systems that keep Iran in the air. Today's strike on the Air Force Base in Isfahan fits into a broader effort to erode Iran's ability to continue producing, launching, and defending. And when you look at the figures that are published today, you understand the depth of the campaign. More than 322 waves of attacks from Iran towards Israel since the start of this war. Around 940 missiles that were launched, more than 550 drones. And on the other side, thousands of targets attacked in Iran, more than 12,000 munitions were dropped, thousands of sorties, hundreds of strike missions, and broad damage to anti-aircraft systems, radars, and defensive batteries. These figures do not tell the whole story, but they do show pace and intensity. One of the reasons a day like this is also shaking Europe is the Iranian launch towards Diego Garcia and the assessments that the range of Iranian missiles has extended beyond 3,000 kilometers. In Europe, for the first time, they are now asking out loud, are we actually in the range of the missiles? The media in Germany and Britain is dealing with this almost non-stop. In Berlin, they already know that they are relying on the Arrow 3 systems, the Israeli-made Arrow 3 systems. In London, they understand that they are much more dependable on the American umbrella. This is not just an argument about ranges. It is the collapse of a sense of immunity. In Britain, the storm is especially intense. It has been claimed there that Israeli intelligence exposed to London the scope of the threat, and the Israeli warning was clear. Iran has firepower that can also reach London. In the last few hours, the British discussion was shifted from the question of whether Britain is involved enough to the question of whether Britain itself is on the target list. And at the same time, underwater, the kingdom is already moving forces. The nuclear attack submarine HMS Anson has been deployed in the Arabian Sea. This is one of the most advanced submarines in the Royal Navy. It carries Tomahawk cruise missiles with a range of about 1,600 kilometers and heavyweight spearfish torpedoes. According to the reports, it left Australia at the beginning of the month, crossed thousands of nautical miles, and is now operating in the northern Arabian Sea, waiting for orders. If a political decision is made in London, it can move closer, raise near the surface, and launch a salvo of 4 cruise missiles towards pre-selected targets. This is not the only nuclear submarine in this region. And that is exactly why the British message is now much clearer. Britain is no longer satisfied with declarations alone. The significance of this move is twofold. First, for the first time, Britain has expanded its approval for the United States to use its bases not only for interception and defense, but also for operations intended to protect shipping routes in Hormuz. Second, it is positioning a hidden naval force that can strike deep. This is a weapon of quiet deterrence, a weapon that you do not see, do not photograph, and do not know exactly where it is. But in Tehran, they understand very well what it means. And in the meantime, not only military facilities are entering the Iranian threats. In recent hours, a new and highly unusual warning came from General Abulfazl Shekharahi, a senior military spokesman in Iran, according to which parks, tourists, other destinations, resorts, and public areas around the world could become legitimate targets. This is dangerous expansion of the threat. When the regime begins talking not only about bases, ports, and power stations, but also about global civilian spaces, it is signaling that it is preparing to blur even further the line between the military front and the civilian sphere. This is no longer just a message to Israel, it is a message to the world. Alongside the external threats, there are growing signs of internal fracture. Today, there were reports of turmoil within the Revolutionary Guards surrounding the commander of their air and also Space Force, Brigadier General Majid Mushavi. He's been accused of not being in the field, of leaving the forces without sufficient leadership, of families of fighters complaining, and of inaccurate data being passed to the leadership about the scale of launches and their results. Their criticism like this comes out during the middle of the war. It is not a minor detail. It is a sign of pressure inside the system. This also connects to another picture taking shape today around the region itself. There are those who now identify there are not functioning state, but a ruling structure behaving like an occupying force in its own country. Fewer services, less legitimacy, more repression, and greater dependencies on military and ideological forces. At the same time, Khamenei's son continues to remain unseen. In Israel, the assessment is that he is alive, but that it is the Revolutionary Guards who are actually managing all the affairs. This hiding badly damages the regime's ability to project stability. There is almost no precedent for an Iranian ruler at a moment like this, not coming before the public, not providing moral backing, and not being seen on the ground. Even so, in Israel, they are not building on an immediate regime collapse. The assessment voiced today was clear. At no point was there any expectation that the regime would fall during the war. The assessments are that if it happens, it will happen months after the war ends, after deep economic strangulation, after sustained damage to infrastructure, and perhaps after an American move around Karag. This is important because it prevents illusion. Whoever looks at Tehran and wants to see immediate collapse is not necessarily reading the pace of change correctly. But whoever looks at the broader picture does see breaking points. And now to Lebanon, because there too the line is not climbing down for even a second. 9 Hezbollah terrorists were eliminated in southern Lebanon by the Air Force of Israel and fighters from Division 91. Soldiers from Unit 869 identified gunmen approaching the area where the forces were operating, and then they quickly closed the cycle, opened fire on them, and at the same time the Air Force struck and eliminated them. In addition, Abu Halil Baraji, the commander of the special forces of the Radwan force, was terminated alongside 2 other terrorists in Majdal, and then he was a commander responsible for terror plans against the IDF forces, and his elimination is another blow to the unit that was supposed to lead infiltration and complex attacks against Israel. But it did not end with eliminations. After the deadly rocket that hit Misgav Am this morning and terminated Ofer Moshkovitz, an Israeli, the IDF is deepening the maneuver in southern Lebanon. In some places, the security zone now reaches a depth of 9 to 11 kilometers inside South Lebanon. Division 162 has completed its deployment. Division 36 continues focused operations. Brigade 7 eliminated more than 10 terrorists, and the Golani forces, an infantry unit in the IDF, also located a structure that had served as a gathering point for terrorists. And at the same time, brigades Andalitani and in the Kasamiya area were attacked in order to hit Hezbollah's supply chains and prevent the movement southward of terrorists and of weapons. Defense Minister Israel Katz ordered the acceleration of the destruction of houses in the contact villages, according to the Rafah and the Gaza model. Even so, in the defense establishment, they are still avoiding damage to the core infrastructure of the Lebanese state itself, so as not to portray Hezbollah as the defender of the people. And inside Lebanon itself, the political discourse is also starting to turn. Samir Gayaga publicly attacked Iran today and said that the war in Lebanon is explicitly Iran's war, not an internal Lebanese discussion. In Lebanon, there is growing fear of the deepening Iranian grip, including an attempt to enrich at the port of Beirut and the transformation of a displaced persons camp into a terror hub. This fear Also connects to reports about around 100 Iranian officers sent to Lebanon in order to retain Hezbollah and supervise its rearmament. In simple words, even in Lebanon, more and more voices are now saying out loud that their country has become a hostage of the Iranian war. And over all of this now hangs another heavy question. Is the fear of an Iranian invasion of the Gulf states realistic? Today, there were already reports of an Iranian threat towards the United Arab Emirates. When you connect the list of blackout targets, the threat against the energy and the desalination infrastructure, the attacks on the Gulf states since the beginning of the war, and the message that Hormuz will remain open to everyone except Iran's enemies, you understand that this is not just psychological pressure. It is an attempt to keep all of Iran's neighbors under constant threat. What happened over Iran and what is now happening underwater, on the shores, in the Gulf, and in Lebanon has already changed the Middle East. The next 48 hours will determine whether the American ultimatum leads to the opening of Hormuz by force or to a regional infrastructure war that no one will be able to stop. So, the situation is very, very complex, as you can see. But there's one thing that I know that I'm doing when I don't have all the answers, and that's trusting in God. So, let's pray. Let's ask Him to give wisdom to our leaders. Let's ask Him to change the hearts of our enemies, to make the godly decisions in every situation. Let's pray that God will force their hands to make mistakes when they're launching their rockets. Let's pray for them to not be able and not want to launch more attacks against Israel and against the United States and against the forces. Let's pray for all the soldiers that are here, US forces, Israeli forces, and now some British forces and sailors in the submarine. Let's pray for God to protect them and their family members. Let's pray for the children of Israel. Let's pray for all those that were harmed and injured by this direct hit in the Israeli southern city of Arad. And let's keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem.